Okay, Formula 1 has returned for the 8th race of the season in Monaco, so prepare to go to sleep, as this is Connor F1, and this is the 2024 Monaco Grand Prix. So it's time for our first doubleheader of the year, and after the Borefest of Imola last week, you would hope we finally get to see some good racing on track. But we're going to Monaco, of course we are. So just before we get into it, I'd like to say thank you for 160 subscribers, and I hope that we can get to 200 subscribers soon. So let's get on with the video. This week's news begins with more rumours of the driver market. Valtteri Bottas has been rumoured to be moving to Williams for next year to take Logan Sargent's seat. If this does happen, Williams will have to change their name to the second driver team. Or, Valtteri, it's James, the team. Bottas isn't the only driver being linked to the British team, as it seems that the Audi rumours have finally lost some weight, as Sainz has been linked to the team as well. This is yet another chip on Logan Sargent's shoulder, but it was also an interesting way to think about a Bottas and Sainz lineup at the Williams team, as where would Albon go, but mainly because it would really seem like Williams is becoming the retirement home of second drivers. F1 has decided to put their fight with Andretti on hold for a little bit, as more tracks have been joining the calendar, with tracks in Thailand, Indonesia, and South Korea being seen as the next big places for Formula 1. And while having more Asian Grand Prix is always a good thing, it really does make me question why would you want to build an entire new track in Asia when Malaysia is right there. But then again, anything to make Helmut Tilke more money, right? It seems both the teams and the drivers are starting to feel what we fans feel, as we watch this weekend, as Lewis Hamilton has finally came out and said that F1 needs to do something to make Monaco a more interesting event for the fans. I do believe though there's quite an easy answer for this one. Just stop watching Formula 1 and start watching Formula E when it gets to Monaco, because at least then you don't have to listen to the Dutch national anthem. McLaren has again added to the beauty of the Monaco GP by adding a new Senna livery to their car for the weekend. And while it is a beautiful message for the legacy of Senna, I did think at first that it was an Aussie livery for Oscar Piastri, maybe to celebrate the fact that he's not driving for Alpine this weekend. So on to the action on track with FP1, where, with this being the 70th running of the Monaco GP, the drivers decided to pull all the tricks out of the bag, with the only places of action during the practice sessions being the cars going off, with Sainz taking the curb at the chicane, and with Hamilton taking the same line, probably testing out the Ferrari strategies. Turn 1 was a magnet to the back markers, with Albon forgetting what car he was driving, Bottas practicing the Williams line for next year, and Magnussen taking himself off the track, just to make sure he doesn't take out more cars this weekend. Zhou tried to outclass his teammate in hopes of keeping his seat, but instead did a Perez and destroyed his front wing, and then leaving his broken front wing to be used as a Mario Kart item to break Leclerc's car, another idea for F1 to make this weekend more interesting. Of course, one thing all fans have been waiting for was for the Monaco curse to strike, with Leclerc giving the curse an early break by going off at the swimming pool, but otherwise had a pretty good session besides the whole Zhou incident, finishing up on 5th with the mediums. Hamilton surprisingly topped the session, with his teammate in the McLaren right up his gearbox, but with how qualifying went last year, we shouldn't get our hopes up. The sponsors must have been happy with Max breaking all their signage around the track, but Max Verstappen wasn't the only one doing this, because by the time we got to FP2, the swimming pool chicane had no sponsors left on the wall. The Red Bulls have seemed to be off the pace so far this weekend, with Perez seeing red and hitting the casino sponsor, at Casino, and with Verstappen taking after Zhou last weekend by jumping like a kangaroo around the city streets, taking after his time as Ricciardo's teammate it seems. Cars again were going off, with Russell cutting the chicane as he couldn't even hold on to his steering wheel, with his Silver Arrow seeming to want to join the yachts in the marina. Both McLarens had a scare, with Piastri and Leclerc at the swimming pool and Norris at the chicane, getting ready to go for a gap that exists. Cars were also hitting the wall at the entry of the swimming pool, with the wall moving itself out of the way for the drivers, even letting Stroll pass one time, before realising its mistake and pushing him off the next time by. Gasly slapped the wall, and Logan Sargent got confused in how he got past a Ferrari and almost binned it at the final corner, and all because a Ferrari was pitting. the Monaco curse is still biding its time, as Leclerc tops the session, almost 2/10 from Hamilton, though he did go off at turn 1, so let's see if he can have some heroics and descend a Vought. FP3 again had Leclerc at the top of the session, with the Red Bulls once again crying about how bad their car is over the radio. This must have mean that the Mercedes and the Red Bull had swapped cars for the weekend, as Hamilton would take flight at the swimming pool, which had finally had its barrier sponsors replaced, and there goes Bottas destroying them. The stake of Bottas tried to show how he is still quicker than Lewis Hamilton, but lost it coming out of the swimming pool, hitting the wall and breaking his suspension. So I don't know if Williams really needs another driver to break their car each weekend. So quickly on to the most important part of the weekend, qualifying. And with the amazing speed from Leclerc and the horrible pace of Verstappen during the practice sessions, we should expect another Max Verstappen pole position. On to Q1, where, with Daniel Ricciardo getting his V-Carb into P8, Sergio Perez found himself down in the knockout zone. And with both Norris and Gasly going faster than him, Perez will be knocked down to P18. And even with one of the cars ahead of him being Logan Sargent, he would still fail to get out of the knockout zone, with Perez being joined by the before-stated Sargent, both state cars, and Alonso? Okay, what is going on this weekend? So, with both Alonso and Perez being out early, there was now 3 spots up for grabs to be taken in Q2, with 3 of the top cars being out. And yes, I say 3, because Stroll is still in the Aston Martin. Q2 was a bit more of a normal event, with Stroll out, what did I say, both Haas drivers, Ricciardo being out-qualified by Tsunoda, oh, hello Lawson, and Ocon, who finished in P11, with Gasly getting through to Q3. Alpine being good for once was not on my bingo card this weekend, and Albon, who would take the final spot in Q2, so Logan should probably give up his seat now. On to Q3, with the first runs, where Leclerc would set the provisional Powell lap time, with the order looking something out of the early 2000s, with the Ferraris and McLarens going back to back to back, with Piastri ahead of Sainz and Norris until Verstappen would take his slow Red Bull up to P3. And on to the final runs, where the Mercedes would first try to show themselves that they did have some pace, but would eventually get dropped down as the other cars would go faster than them, as Leclerc would increase his pole, as both his teammate and the McLarens wouldn't be able to beat him, as Verstappen would hit the wall at the start of his lap and would have to settle for 6th behind Russell. Looks like we know who won't be surviving turn 1 then. Oh, and a quick thing to add here. Both Haas drivers were disqualified from qualifying for the DRS being too big, which is strange because DRS means nothing around this circuit. So, onto the race, where, with the things are going, there are only 2 things that could happen. 1, Leclerc breaks the curse, or 2, the curse breaks Leclerc. At the start, Leclerc started running away at turn 1, and as Max and Lewis had 2021 flashbacks, Piastri went to get revenge on Sainz for Miami, so held it around the outside as Sainz would fail to not hit Piastri, leading to Sainz going off at the casino early. As the drivers would snake through the tunnel, the red flag would be waved. But for what reason? Perez would get a bad start, leading to him falling back into Kevin Magnussen. And with that, I don't think I really have to explain what happens next. Hulkenberg, of course, would get hit as well, leading to a double Haas DNF. So as the cars began to pull into the pits, one car seemed to have extra damage, and that was the Alpine of Ocon. Let me guess, he hit his teammate. Oh, he actually did. Ocon would for some reason go for a gap, and it was at first a clean move, before cutting across and taking the Alonso and Stroll line at Austin over his teammate Gasly. So, with scatters of sponsors and metal, plus the eternal and internal screaming of some of the drivers, by the end of lap 1, we would have 4 cars already out of this race. And while yes, this is an exciting prospect, we have probably already set the death sentence for this race. As all the cars get to change tyres thanks to the red flag, the drivers who were on mediums would now move to the hard tyres, which would get them to the end. As for the hard runners before the red flag, they would have to move to the mediums, and potentially could face disqualification if or not to do a double pit stop. Team LH fans start screaming. The race would restart from lap 1, but not all the cars would have gotten over the first sector line before the red flag. Looking at you, Perez, which would give Sainz another chance as he would get to start in P3 once again. At the restart, once again Leclerc started running away, but this time Sainz got scared of Oscar, so decided to stay up behind him as they head up the hill. All the cars would get through cleanly, as the race highlights would then jump 13 laps forward to the top 3 of Leclerc, Piastri and Sainz fighting, big quotes on that one. This fighting would mainly be about the 4th place driver of Norris, who was still within striking distance of the top cars, but with George Russell in 5th, being told by Mercedes to not drive the car any faster, as to make sure the car didn't break by the halfway point, knowing Russell's history, so a gap between the top 4 and Russell would start making both us, the fans, and the teams potentially think about a pit stop. The highlights would again just jump forward in time by 16 laps. Jesus, is it that bad of a race? Oh, and the positions haven't changed since that time period. So many of the hopes of getting people to, wake up, but my fellow Aussies really understand what I mean by that, would show that the battle for 12th would better be described as the Alonso Train 2.0, as all the remaining cars would remain behind Alonso for the rest of the race. Jumping forward again, because nothing is happening, F1 would pay off Aston Martin to get Stroll to pit to maybe put some action into this race, but this would probably be the only real pit stop of the race. Oh, wait. No, it isn't. Stroll must have been thought he was playing the new F1 24 game early, because he probably had damage off. So he would do what we've all done on the F1 game and hit the inside of the wall, getting a puncture. Good times. This surprise wake-up call would allow us to see the only real overtake of the weekend with Bottas on Sargent for 13th. Though this train of Bottas, Sargent and Zhou would soon be just ahead of the speedy Lance Stroll on new softs, and with all the traction in the world, Stroll would be able to complete his first and only overtakes of the year, which, though one of the tunnels with Zhou was actually pretty good. The Stroll pit stop would get some cars to pit, and with 2021 coming back to our minds, as Mercedes would try to get Hamilton past Verstappen, but without allowing Verstappen to get past Russell. So they decided to pit Lewis, which would try to beat Max, and just left Russell out there to do anything, until Verstappen would get onto the back of Russell and push him till the end of the race. The highlights would then do its last jump, again going to the battle for last on track, which still had no real overtaking, well, besides Sargent overtaking Zhou, but both of them are losing their seats by the end of the season anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But finally, as the Ferraris and the McLarens would finally end their fighting with Piastri falling back and blocking Carlos, Charles Leclerc would cross the line to win the Monaco Grand Prix, being the first Monegasque to win his home race, and with Oscar getting pushed to the line by Carlos in 3rd and Lando in P4. Oh, and Russell would actually be able to hold on for 5th with Max behind. So that was the Monaco Grand Prix, though I think giving it the title of Grand Prix is maybe a bit too much. But even though this race was so bad, of course the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 didn't disappoint. So, I've been Connor, signing off.